So Pastor Greg asked me to preach on my favorite passage. Well, I'm actually preaching 2 Sundays, this Sunday and next Sunday. So this one is my really favorite, but next Sunday is my really favorite. But this passage I came to find, or I was taught, I would say, in high school. And I had a couple good friends in high school that actually put this passage to song and wrote a song for this passage. I toyed with the idea of singing it for you and asking Brian if I could borrow his guitar. But then I thought, no, I'm preaching next Sunday and I want you to come back. So I'm not going to sing the song, but it is one of my favorite passages. It comes in the book of Job. Now, Job is not a book that we look at often. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you do. I've found myself in the last month looking at it more than occasionally. Job is a book about suffering. It's about the sovereignty of God. It's even a book a little bit about friendship and what good friends and what bad friends are and how you could be a good friends. One of the things that the book of Job asks the question, why do good people suffer? And you want to know the answer to that? Well, you won't find it in the book of Job. At least you're not going to find the answer that you would like to get. You do get an answer to that question, but it doesn't give a real clear answer. But the passage I want to focus on today doesn't talk about any of those themes. It talks about a different theme. It's joined, but it's a theme of hope. Hope. How many messages have you heard on hope? I've heard a lot of messages on faith. I've heard a lot of messages on love. I've preached a lot of them. Maybe you've heard the phrase, so now abide faith, hope, and love, these 3, but the greatest of these is love, and rightly so. But hope is in there too. But to me, I think of the 3, faith, hope, and love, hope is kind of the Cinderella, the stepsister that never gets invited to the ball. So we're going to talk about hope today. Now, interestingly enough, hope goes hand in hand with faith. Hebrews 11:1 says this, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. Okay? So faith is the assurance, I know this is going to happen, of something that I'm hoping for. It's something still in the future. It's something that's still out there. The Cambridge Dictionary defines hope this way. It says, to want something to happen to be true, and usually have a good reason to think that it might be true. Okay? I think Cambridge is missing something in this definition. It's a good definition. You want something to be true, you usually have a good reason to think that it might, but I think it leaves something out, and that hope usually anticipates something positive or good is going to happen. Okay? We don't hope that our team loses the Super Bowl, unless you bet a lot of money on them or against them. And then we usually hope that they win. Okay? We don't hope that the Heat are going to win the NBA playoffs. We hope that the Nuggets are going to win the NBA playoffs. That would be a good thing from someone who lived in Denver for many years. We don't hope that Jesus is going to take another 2,000 years to return. We hope that he comes soon. And so we're anticipating something. We have an assurance that something, we have a good reason to believe that this is going to happen, and it's a good thing that's going to happen, but it's just a little bit down the road. We're still waiting for it, but it creates an anticipation. It creates an excitement. It creates a feeling of joy, perhaps, that something's happened. Hope is essential to our well-being. There's a saying that you can live a month without food. Some of us could probably last a little longer than a month. That was a joke. We can last a week without water, maybe, but you can't even last a day without hope. You can't survive. You give up. So that brings us to Job. Now, Job has had a rough time. The book of Job, I'm just going to kind of give a summary of Job, and then we are going to get to Job 19, I promise you. But the book of Job starts with a cosmic conversation between God and Satan in heaven. And God's on his throne, and Satan comes up to his throne, and they start this dialogue, and God says, "Hey, Satan, have you seen my man Job?" And Satan says, "Of course he's your guy. You've given him everything. Look at that. He doesn't have a worry in the world. He's got money. He's rich. He's got a nice family. He's got a lot of nice stuff. Look at that car he's driving. He just bought that new boat with the motor. Of course he loves you. Take that away from him and we'll see." And so God says, "Okay, I'll let you do that." And so then it becomes, in the first couple chapters of Job, it's just like disaster after disaster. God allows Satan to touch Job's riches. And he loses everything. Then he touches his family. And he loses his kids. And ultimately, God allows Satan to touch his health. And he loses his health. And in terms of suffering, Job is being hit from all sides. I call this in your notes, if you have your bulletin, I call this in your notes, Job's path of pain. And it's real. And if you think about times that you've suffered or you've gone through suffering, or maybe you are presently suffering, it may fall into one of these four categories. Job suffered financial loss. Maybe you've been there. You've had a deal gone bad. You've had something that has come up, maybe an illness or something. You lose your job, and you go through financial hardship. Well, Job was there. He lost everything. All of his cattle, all of his animals are wiped out, and he did not have a policy with Peterson Insurance. And he was destitute. Lost it all. Then Job suffers the loss of death in his family. Maybe you've suffered this in your life. He had 10 children, and they're at a party, and a wind came and blew the house down, and all 10 children died. Think about that funeral. 10 caskets. I wouldn't have been able to preach it. Yeah. Yeah, it's real, the pain that he's going through. Then Job suffered the loss of his health. And some of us, or some of you, have gone through this, where you've had health challenges. In his case, he had sores break out all over his body. The sores were so bad that he would take shards of pottery to scrape them. This isn't just a mosquito bite, guys. This is rough. And he's just trying to get some relief by scraping himself with shards of pottery. And then Job suffered from the pain of what I call toxic relationships. He had his buddies show up. And his buddies, instead of coming there to comfort Job, they kind of came to pound on him a little bit and accused him of being false towards God. They were proponents, I think, of an early form of prosperity gospel. That God wants you happy and wealthy, and since you're not happy and wealthy anymore, then something must be wrong with you, and you need to get it fixed. And that was the comfort that these friends of Job got. So he's got these four things going. He suffered financial loss. He suffered the loss of death. He suffered the loss of health. He'd suffered loss in his relationships. And usually when we go through suffering, we may go through one, we may go through two. Sometimes they go hand in hand. A lot of times illness goes with financial hardship. But Job hits a quad here. He's got all four of them. And then we get to our passage for today, and Job has one more thing to suffer. Job 19:17, he also has bad breath. Job 19:17, my breath is repulsive to my wife. I'm rejected by my own family. Guys, it doesn't get any worse than that. My wife doesn't even want to kiss me anymore. The dog won't play with me. They got to hang a pork chop around my neck to get the dog to come. No. Now, we kind of make a joke of this last one. It's there. You see it? It's in there. My breath is strange to my wife. I put in a New Living Translation. My breath is repulsive to my wife. It's in the Bible. We kind of made a joke of this, but if you think about the magnitude of the loss that Job is going through, the magnitude of loss on this man's shoulders, think of the pain he's gone through. You depressed yet? I kind of am. Yeah, this is a rough spell for this man. And he's going through it. He's kind of complaining a little bit in the first part of Job 19, but then we get to verse 23. And I'm going to read the whole passage, and then we're going to kind of pick it out little by little. But if you read the first part of this chapter 19, it's a little like woe is me, you know. But here the tone changes drastically. And what we hear here, it's not a cry of a person wallowing in self-pity. It's a cry of victory. A victory which is not here now, but is near. The song that we finished up with. I'm fighting a battle that we've already won. And that's a little bit about what Job is saying here. Is, oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Get your pens out, guys. Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives. And at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me. Wow. What a cry of hope. Here's a man in the depths of despair. He's hit the quad. He's suffered financial loss. He's suffered death. He suffered bad friendship. He suffered health. He's got the bad breath going. But he's crying out in hope. And he wants everybody to hear it. So here's what I call Job's path of hope. And the first thing that we see is that hope comes from believing in a Redeemer. Hope comes from believing in a Redeemer. His cry is, I know that my Redeemer lives. Now you need to understand, I'm not a biblical scholar like Pastor Greg is, but as best I could do research, most people believe, and again, it's hard to tell, but most people believe that Job may be the first book of the Bible ever written. Many people think Moses wrote it. I've heard some commentaries saying that maybe one of Job's friends wrote it, maybe even Job himself. But Job is living around the time of the patriarchs, probably, We see that from some of the customs. For instance, Job offers sacrifices. Well, after Moses, only priests offered sacrifices. Prior to Moses, heads of family could offer sacrifices, and Job offers sacrifices at the end. So there's some things in there that give us indication that maybe he was a contemporary of Abraham, Isaac, somewhere around that time. And so you need to understand that they didn't have the Gospels. They didn't have John 3:16. Christ hadn't even been born, much less died on the cross. But Job understands that somehow he has a redeemer. Now, the word that he uses here is used in the Old Testament quite a bit. It refers to a concept sometimes called the kinsman redeemer. If you know the book of Ruth, Boaz was a redeemer. He was a kinsman redeemer, and he was one who was going to step into the shoes of someone who had died and was going to purchase the property and marry the wife of the deceased so that their lineage could go on. So there was a sense of there was a economic benefit, but also a social benefit for the person who was being redeemed. In this case, would be the widow of someone who had died. And Boaz does that when he marries Ruth. And there's an interesting, in the book of Ruth, you've got this interesting negotiation that occurs because there was another relative that was a little bit closer to Ruth, who should have been the one who stepped in there. But Boaz was able to talk him out of it. So this concept of redemption is most used in the Old Testament referring to the kinsman. Someone that stepped into the role of a relative, would inherit his belongings, but also would keep alive his lineage. And I don't think, and that's here, but the idea, the concept of Christ who came to pay for our sins, Job probably didn't understand all of that, but he understood that he needed someone to come and pay and rescue him. And he called that person his Redeemer. Job believed in redemption. It's a good thing to believe in because we need it so badly. It's something that often comes to me and how much I am in need of redemption. And I'm not just talking about salvation. That's a big part of it. But day to day, as we go through challenges and as we stumble, we need someone there to forgive. We need someone there to restore. Redemption is a theme that courses through the Bible. And never forget God who is a God who redeems. Where's Todd? I can't see because Todd was talking to us about someone who he had taken to court and had found redemption. It was through the the singing group that comes. I'm thinking in Spanish, half in Spanish right now. But he had gone to jail, done a lot of time, and found redemption. And that it's a true thing, guys. It's a true thing, and it's there for all of us. The other thing that brings hope to Job is hope comes from an eternal perspective. From eternal perspective. Job knows that God is eternal. In the end, he's going to be standing. It says, for I know my Redeemer lives, and at the last of what? Last of everything. The last still isn't here, guys. It's still coming. So this is still in the future. But at the last, he will stand upon the earth. He will be the last one standing. You know, it's easy to get overwhelmed if we believe that this life is all there is. I don't know if I could live that way. This week, this article came out. I saw it online. Someone was interviewing that great philosopher, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Arnold had these words of wisdom to share with us. It was from an interview he had with that other philosopher, Howard Stern. A lot of smartness going around between those two. It says, it reminds me of Howard Stern's question to me. Tell me, Governor, what happens to us when we die? I said, nothing. You're 6 feet under. Anyone that tells you something else is a blank liar, he said. While the former bodybuilder added that death is a topic he feels uncomfortable with, he has shared that heaven in his mind is a fantasy. When people talk about, I will see them again in heaven, it sounds so good, but the reality is that we won't see each other again after we're gone. That's the sad part. I know people feel comfortable with death, but I don't, he said. No wonder. Yeah. Well, Job isn't a liar. He's a righteous man. And he knows that Arnold doesn't know what he's talking about. There is an eternity. There is a heaven. There is life after death. I know that my Redeemer lives. At the last, he will stand upon the earth. And guys, gals too, when we see that this life is not all that there is. In fact, Rick Warren in his book, Purpose-Driven Life, says, really, compared to eternity, this life is just a drop in the bucket. And really, we're just in the waiting room for eternity. The real good stuff is coming. We're in this life to prepare for what comes and to get ready for what God has in store for us. That's what this life is about. And so if we can have that perspective, it brings hope. Because we know that the pain of loss, the pain of illness, the pain of financial suffering, the pain of relationships that go bad, someday it's going to come together and it's going to be all right. We're fighting a battle that's already won. And we need to keep that perspective in mind. It's an eternal perspective. And if you do that, there's things in life, when things come up, one of the things I like about crises is that it really kind of helps orient things for me. When I'm going through a crisis, and we've been through crises, we understand what we're talking about. I may talk a little bit next week. I haven't decided if I'm going to do that yet or not. But when we go through crises, it really helps us clarify what's important in life and what's not. You know, when you have someone who's going through an illness, or someone who dies, or someone who's going through a lot of pain, it really doesn't matter if the Twins won or lost yesterday. And it really doesn't matter if they indicted Trump or not. Now, to him it would, and to some people it would. But really in the eternal scheme of things, crises help clarify what's important and what's not. And Job's getting that. The final thing that brings hope to Job is hope comes from knowing that one day he will see Jesus. Now, he doesn't say Jesus here. He says God, but I'm going to put Jesus in here. I think he's there, and God is there, and God. But he says, after my skin has been thus destroyed. He figures he's dying. He says, after this trouble's over, after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh, he understood somehow the resurrection. He still didn't have Jesus' words, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believes on me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. He didn't have those words yet, but he had the concept. In my flesh, I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself. And my eyes are going to behold him. I'm not talking about someone else. I'm talking about this guy. He says, my heart faints within me. That's what the ESV translates. I was looking into this a little bit. It's actually a little bit lower in the body. Job is saying that this is kind of a visceral reaction. This is something that churns his insides. It really gets him excited. Way back when, the seat of emotions wasn't the heart, it was the gut. And we all understand that, no? When you get that feeling and it kind of gets a knot in your stomach, and whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, the knot's still there. And that's what he's saying. That's what consumes him. It's a visceral reaction. It's a physical response to this knowledge that someday he's going to be face to face with his Redeemer. I've got a friend who recently lost his mom. And when he was sharing this in a meeting I was at, he says, yeah, my mom is now 100% devoted to worshiping Jesus. That's how he saw her death. You know, the longer I walk this path of life, and I'm getting on. I'm having a birthday in another month, and I haven't hit the 60 yet, but I'm getting real close. But the longer I walk this path of life, I understand that it's rarely a smooth path. There's bumps along the way. One of the things I didn't understand when I started in ministry when I was 26 is that much of what we do in ministry is come alongside hurting people and come alongside of people who are in pain and who are in suffering and give them hope. I thought it was just about getting them saved when I started. And that's part of it. But there's a lot more to it. You're never going to hear me preach a prosperity gospel. You know, I'd love to be able to preach that if you come to Jesus, you're never going to be sick again. If you come to Jesus, you're never going to have financial hardship. If you come to Jesus, your relationships will all be fantastic and you will never struggle. The problem is I don't believe it. And life is a lot more complicated than that. We do have loved ones that die, and it hurts. We do go through financial challenges, and it hurts. It's tough. Caused some of us to get gray hair. Some of you just lost yours. Some of us go through illnesses, and not just short ones, long ones. I started off with the question of why do bad things happen to good people, and the book of Job doesn't answer that question necessarily. You know, and it starts off with Satan. He's trying to prove God wrong, and you kind of got this cosmic dialogue going along by Satan, and it kind of starts to look like, hey, maybe we're all just kind of pawns that are being moved around by Satan, by God, but as you read the book of Job, and especially when you get to the end where God speaks up, you understand that even though Satan was trying to take Job down, God had a different plan. And he wanted us to see who, not why. See, sometimes he doesn't answer why. He just says, you need to have trust in the who, in God. That was his answer to Job. Job never found out why he lost 10 kids. Maybe at some point, I don't know if he got to read the book of Job or if it was written after he died or not. I don't know. But now it does have a happy ending. He does get his stuff back. He doesn't get his kids back, but he has additional kids. He gets his reputation back. So it has a happy ending. Not all endings are like Job's endings. But he gets his stuff back. He has other children. He gets his health back. His relationships come together. I'm going to assume that he resolved that bad breath thing. And you know what? If you have faith in the Redeemer, and I'm using the word the Redeemer here, your ending can be just as happy. Maybe not in this life, but in the life to come. That same vision of seeing Jesus face to face can be your vision as well. You know, life is hard. But one of the things I've learned that there are certain things that God can only teach you through the tough times, through suffering. I have some friends that lost a 16-year-old son. He went to a party, got in a fight, won the fight. The guy he beat up came back with a gun. They had some really hard questions for this pastor. I didn't have very many good answers. They asked the why question a lot. And I said, I can't give you the why. But I can give you the who. And they found him. They found him. So here's the bottom line. Amid life's challenges, lean into the hope, which comes from faith in the Redeemer. When you're going through the challenges of life, and we all do, and some of you who are young, you'll get there. Maybe you're going through them now. You've got challenges coming, which I never dealt with. Holy smokes. Good luck. Yeah. Lean into the hope which comes from faith in the Redeemer. And I want to give you 3 suggestions here. First of all, we can do this by telling our story of hope. One of the things that I love about this passage is it starts off with Job crying out, "Oh, that my words were recorded. Oh, that someone would take a chisel and some lead and would pound these words into a rock." And you know what? Someone did. They're in the book of Job. We can read them 4,000 years later, and we can still get hope from this man who suffered and has been dead, long dead. You see, hope is infectious. It's contagious. And you, if you have hope, you need to share that story of hope, because I'm telling you, there's people all around you that have lost hope or are losing it. We've got to share this. People will get excited. They need to hear it. They need to have hope. They don't have it. That's one of the most powerful things about the gospel is the hope that it brings to a life that is in the pit. So tell your message of hope. Write it. Put it on Facebook. Talk to your friends, your coworkers. If you see someone who's struggling with hope, tell them your story, whatever that is. Don't preach at them so much as just tell your story. And here's Job yelling out his story, and it brings us hope thousands of years later. Second thing, make sure you're trusting in the Redeemer. I'm not going to assume that everyone here has made a decision to put their faith and trust in the Redeemer. If you haven't, please consider it. Please consider it. It makes a world of difference. I'm not saying that the pain's going to go away. I'm not saying that you will no longer suffer. What I'm saying is that you will have a new hope, and there is something to hope for, even though you're in the depths. So this is a genuine offer. If you have not yet put your trust in the Redeemer, please come talk to me, talk to Pastor Matt, talk to one of the ladies, talk to a greeter, say, can you point me to someone I can talk to? Please. Don't leave today without this hope. It's real. It's true. And finally, understand that God doesn't always tell us why. But that's okay, because we know the who. I don't have the answers for even some of the things that we've struggled with as a family. I don't know the why. But we know the who. And we know that He is more than able. And so we hold on to that. We hold on to that. Got a minute left. I was going to put a picture. I didn't get one, but I asked my friend Bob Johnson if I could tell his story. Bob's my barber. He's out on Highway 2. Before you get to he's on the right-hand side, on the north side of Highway 2, just past the Forest Lake Motel, about 2 blocks past. He's got this little store. Every time I come up, I need to get my hair cut, I go to Bob, and we start talking. A year ago, I went to get my hair cut, and Bob is thin as a rail. And I says, Bob, what is wrong? He says, I have no idea. And he'd been going to the doctors, he'd been going to hospitals, and he'd been having ups and downs and struggles. And I says, Bob, do you have faith? He says, well, some. He says, do you mind if I pray with you? He says, no, I'd really like that. So I sat there and I prayed with him, prayed that God would give him healing and prayed that God would give him comfort. And he felt he was dying. Went back a month ago and the guy's not fat, but he's he's doing a lot better. And I tell Bob, you still praying? He says, I pray every day now. I pray every day. And I don't know where in the journey Bob is yet. We'll have that conversation at some point. But whether his journey has taken him to believe in a Redeemer, but he's found hope. And he's found hope in the right place. And it wasn't in the doctors, it wasn't in the hospitals, not that they're bad things, but he found it where it really lies, which is in God. Bob, I asked his permission to tell his story. He told me I could. He says, just when you're preaching, don't swear. So I blanked that out in Arnold Schwarzenegger's. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for my friend Bob, that he's finding hope in you. And I pray that as he walks this journey, that he would continue to walk that path, and that you would lead him, if he's not there yet, into a faith in a Redeemer. I pray for those here today, Lord, that need that hope. I pray, Lord, that they wouldn't leave today without talking to someone about how they can have faith in a Redeemer and find this hope that Job had. I pray for those families that are going through suffering right now, Lord. I just pray that you would be with them, walk alongside of them. We know you are. I pray that they would sense your presence in a real way. And I pray, Lord, that you would give them comfort, that you would give them joy, and most of all, that you would help them rely on the hope that comes from our faith in you. I thank you, Lord, that this life is short compared to eternity. And we think of those that have gone before us and are experiencing eternal worship of you, and we yearn for that, Lord. But as you are keeping us here, preparing us for that event, I pray, Lord, that we would be faithful in communicating your message of hope to the people around us. I pray this in your Son's name. Amen.